Being an independent musician in this day and age often involves sitting at a desk in front of a computer screen, clicking away at a mouse and keyboard. And to the casual observer, it might not seem like this person is engaging in an artistic endeavor. I've been a DAW user for years, having started on FL Studio back when it was still called Fruity Loops, before switching on to Ardor. But I've never felt comfortable expressing myself musically inside this ecosystem, even after the addition of MIDI controllers and hardware synths. It was only after I switched to the Electron Digital keys as my primary writing station that my enjoyment of the entire process and my musical output, both in terms of quality and quantity, started really taking off. Now, if you're a professional music producer looking to churn out beats and tracks at hyperspeed, there is simply no beating the DAW. But if your focus in music leans more towards expression than it does towards monetizing your skills at any cost, then ditching the DAW might be something worth considering. Either way, suggesting that there are one-size-fits-all solutions to making music would be ludicrous. Instead, I'm going to talk about what specifically bothered me when writing and recording music inside a DAW, and what are some of the benefits and drawbacks I've experienced while making music for a couple of years exclusively in the DAWless world. Now, just to be clear, I write all my music without a DAW, and then I record it to the Tascam Model 12 multi-track recorder. I've done a previous video on how this mixer fits into my workflow, so be sure to check it out after you watch this. But when it comes to mixing, I'll import the multi-tracks from the Tascam into my DAW and get to mixing them with the old mouse and keyboard. And I do this primarily because of the ability to automate mixer controls, such as the faders, compressor, and EQ settings, and have them behave differently across different sections of the song, thus more precisely evoking the emotions I aim to convey with my music. My DAW of choice for this is Harrison Mixbus 32C, which is already set up for the purpose of mixing and comes out of the box with excellent stock plugins to accomplish just that. And no updates or additional VSTs required. Now let's take a look at a couple of things that have always bothered me in a DAW-centric way of making music. I spent a lot of time in front of a computer doing my day job, and then coming back to the same space once the work is done felt like more of the same old shit. Also, drawing in MIDI notes and sound designing with a mouse pointer is a process I can only describe as counter-artistic. I honestly loathe troubleshooting PC problems whichever way you put it, but having to do it during my music making time makes it that much worse. Operating system, driver, DAW, plugin, and other software updates, together with hardware hiccups, leave a lot of space for shit to hit the fan. While having immediate access to a bunch of options is something that can be remedied by organizing your workflow and DAW interface properly, the abyss of having an incredible amount of tools at your disposal at any time can really be overwhelming, especially to a beginner, coupled with external pressure to always try the next new shiny plugin. This situation can lead to jumping around many different tools while mastering none of them. After a couple of years, producing in a DAW started feeling more like a chore than something enjoyable that I was looking forward to doing. And in 2016, I took time off making music to concentrate on building my house and homestead. And for a while after that, I didn't really have the space where to put my monitors, MIDI controller, and analog synth. Plus, my laptop was getting dated and in need of a serious upgrade if I was to move back into DAW-based music production. So I decided to pick up an innovation circuit and get the ball rolling that way instead of waiting around. One thing led to another and eventually culminated in the setup that I have behind me today. So let's take a look at a couple of things that I particularly enjoy while writing music in my DAWless setup. In addition to running a DAW, the personal computer can run a whole lot of other stuff. And unless you've got a firm workflow set up, it can be tempting to check emails or social media, or distract yourself in many other ways when you're actually supposed to be making music. Whereas in the DAWless world, there are no distractions. Even when I'm low on energy and not particularly inspired, just noodling on my setup and killing time is bound to either produce something usable or put me one step closer towards mastering my instruments. Because there's simply nothing else to do in this here corner. I'm a big fan of solving problems within clearly defined boundaries. This is the space where, for me personally, creativity flourishes. And having 4 or 5 instruments to tell your story with isn't exactly a very tight limitation. There are thousands of examples of musicians making incredible music with just a couple of instruments, even in the electronic music realm. And if you've ever had a chance to look at their process, you'll soon realize that all of them pull it off in the same way, which is getting to know their instrument extremely well and pushing it beyond its intended limits, while having fun at the same time. Which brings me to my next point. Most people dismiss hardware as being just a VST in a box, which isn't exactly wrong in the case of digital, but what about the box? All the keys, faders, knobs and pads work seamlessly with the engine behind them, which makes for a much better instrument than a MIDI controller. Just flip the switch and start making music, with no software updates to worry about. Firmware updates on hardware can cause issues occasionally, but I've personally never had that happen to any of my gear. Nor have I had a creative onslaught stopped dead in its tracks by hardware or software issues since leaving the DAW ecosystem. Hardware is generally more expensive than DAW and software plugins, but it also has a much better resale value and doesn't require regular payments to keep receiving updates. And occasionally, a discontinued piece of gear may increase in price over the years. But I personally don't see guitars and synths as collector's items. To me, these are tools that are meant to be used, and if they're not getting used, they're getting sold. So buying high-quality gear motivates me to keep using it, thereby justifying the financial investment. And speaking about the financial investment involved leads us perfectly into potential drawbacks when entering the DAWless world. There's no going around the fact that physical instruments cost real money, and there's no way in hell I could have afforded even half the instruments behind me when I was just starting out making music in my early 20s. Software plugins have costs of their own, with recurring subscriptions in some cases. But you're still probably looking at locking up 5 to 10 times more money in hardware to recreate similar functionality that you would get from software alone. Also, connecting everything together has some hidden costs of its own, when you factor in cables, power strips, mounts, MIDI hubs, and other gadgets. It might seem obvious, but depending on how deep you want to go, hardware can start taking up considerable real estate. In my case, I've purposely limited my music writing space to a single desk in the corner. So I've managed to keep it within the same footprint of what a DAW with a pair of monitors and a MIDI keyboard might take up. But get on Reddit and check out some of the crazy setups that people like to show off, while having to constantly answer the same old question. Do you even make music with this, bro? While I did say that limitations are one of the main strengths of a DAWless setup, they can also act as a double-edged sword, because there are some things you will simply not be able to do outside of a DAW, especially when we get into the territory of microscopic automations or thick layering with a ridiculous number of tracks. While some of these bullets can be dodged by doing part of the work in a DAW first and then exporting that and loading it into a sampler, I find this method a bit too contrived for my taste. And instead, I would just stick to the hand-picked tools that I have in my DAWless setup. This sums up my experience of composing and recording music without a DAW for the past couple of years. I have no intention of going back to the DAW at this time, and in fact, if I was to change anything about my setup, I would probably simplify even further and maybe try a looper-based setup instead. But your experience might differ. Let me know in the comments how you feel about this whole DAWless fad or trend or whatever you want to call it. Subscribe if you would like to see more videos about releasing your creative potential as an independent musician. And if you'd like to see how everything I just talked about looks in practice, then this next video is for you.